Coming up on this week's Celtics Talk Podcast, the good vibes are flowing, and to embrace them, enjoy them, we've got Sean Grande, the radio voice of the Boston Celtics. He drops by with his thoughts on the team's recent surge and what's ahead. Maybe even a little wrestling talk in there. All coming up on this week's Celtics Talk Podcast. All right, Sean Grande, play-by-play voice of your Boston Celtics. I don't want to ruin surprises like some people at my network. I won't name names, Abigail Chan. But you might hear Sean's voice.
That's her job. Her job is to. You guys are not supposed to suppress news. You're supposed to report the news. Especially if it's off a big night for Rob Williams, man. You're just bouncing off.
We are coming to you, Celtics After Dark tonight, on the heels of a win over the Charlotte Hornets, and the good vibes are flowing. So we'll start there, Sean Grande, whose voice you might hear on our airwaves coming up very soon. So if you just tune in, you'll figure that all out. But how are we feeling about our Boston Celtics right now?
Oh, you're trying not to, you don't want to get too high, too low. Obviously, they've had everybody together, right? And, you and I both look at the numbers. You can dig, start rabbit holing a little much with them, but it's hard to not, you can do what you want with them. But one of the things you can do with them at this point is say that the Celtics have the best body of work in the entire league over the last month, going back to that New Year's Eve game against Phoenix. And this is not a coincidence now. Isn't it funny? Because you get the same feedback, I'm sure, that I do, that when Tatum and Brown miss a game, Celtics lose and they're terrible and whatever. But if DeRozan is out or Devin Booker is out, then those don't count.
Right.
Like, oh, yeah, you beat them, but they didn't have. Okay, well, which is it? And all we have is all we have. And what we know now is with the Celtics at full health, a half season into Ime Udoka, a half season into Brad Stevens, they're playing as well as they have all year. And they're playing, here's the point, they're playing the right way. They're playing with pace. Everything we said, every night, I come home from the games and I have recorded, or at least I've got NBC Boston on. So I just go back to the beginning of the post game and I watch you. I can tell you wouldn't have to know if I hadn't been to the game. I would know what the Celtics did because you see Forsberg like this. Every night they draw me back in and then I'm just pointing again. But they're playing the right way. They're playing with pace. And I'll tell you, nobody ever wants to talk about him as a point guard. This is a Marcus Smart renaissance right now. He's, quarterbacking this thing brilliantly. Nobody wants to talk about the things that make players what they are. You become locked into, Marcus Smart doesn't shoot the ball well. He makes crazy plays. Nobody's ever talked about him as a point guard the same way no one talks about Jason Tatum's defense or Rob Williams passing or Grant Williams in a year in which everybody, what's Ime's thing all the time? Know your personnel, breakdowns, and knowing this guy. Has Grant Williams ever not studied for his test? Has he ever showed up unprepared? He's the guy you're cheating off of, right? And so have you noticed as we transition, I heard you teasing this on the air a little bit, somebody was, that we're the Al Horford, Grant Williams equilibrium. And by the way, that's what's supposed to happen. Like Al Horford is this age and Grant Williams is this age. This is what's supposed to happen. It's what you want to have happen. So as we talk right now, last year when you dialed me up on this little podcast, the Celtics had just lost about a 91-point lead at New Orleans and lost that game. I don't know if you remember, my son had just lost, Drew McIntyre had just lost WWE title.
It was a tough night.
Terrible day. It's just a brutal Sunday all the way around. And now as we're talking, everything is happy-go-lucky before you go into a weekend. But listen, if the Celtics lose at Detroit or at Orlando, then it'll be less Forsberg and more Mannix, right? Like the general mood of the post game over there. I get it. But how can you not be happy watching the way they're playing right now?
Exactly. And I think that is, so when people say to me, and because the most common question I get right now is this a mirage? Should we buy into this? And why is it any different than what we've seen? And are they turning the corner? We've had this conversation 10 times this season. And I say, my eyes tell me something different about this team right now. It's not just that they're playing better. It's not just that they're winning games. It's not just that they're feasting on inferior competition. It's that my eyes tell me they're playing a better brand of basketball, that Ime Udoka is figuring some things out, that Jason Tatum is making shots again, which cures all ails. And like everything is just sort of falling into place a little bit more. And so I'm surprisingly bullish because I've been so surprisingly low at times, and understandably, right? Like this is a frustrating team to watch. But what gives you the most hope, Sean Grande, that this is sustainable and that this team is truly positioning itself for a second half surge?
Right now, listen, what is the question of the year? At the end of the day, we can go over a million things. Now they played late close games. 21-22 is the year in which you make a decision about Jalen and Jason playing together. And it's not high drama that they don't like each other or this nonsense. Do they fit together as basketball parts? And it's funny how much better they fit when these two thoroughbreds race up the floor and start moving without the basketball and find each other. We're talking on like the two of them had 15 assists between them, and they are playing well together. And it's not, listen, everybody knows it was your turn, my turn. Everybody knows in the league. This was the scouting report. And isn't it interesting that as we're talking, it was almost next level game in which James Borrego decided, all right, let's use everybody we have on those two guys and take them out. Right. And you had enough. Listen, I know people want to see Aaron Nesmith play, but is Aaron Nesmith going to knock down 6 out of 8 threes and give you the defense that Josh Richardson was giving you? Probably not. Not yet. These are the decisions. You've got the Schroeder Pritchard one and the Richardson Nesmith one, and all coming together at the trade deadline. But these are the reasons. Listen, there's going to be nights that Marcus Martin Richardson won't shoot that well. Grant Williams may not make those shots. And a game like this gets away because they messed around a little bit in the New Orleans game, but not enough. They messed around for 4 minutes against a really good Miami team. And look what happens. You mess around for 4 minutes and they tie. So this is the point, as Herb Brooks famously said about his 1980 U.S. team. You're not talented enough to win on talent alone. Like they're not good enough to have 6-8 minute runs. Right. Maybe some nights they're going to be against New Orleans. Maybe this weekend they will be, right? Against Detroit and Orlando. And the Brooklyn game becoming interesting too. Like suddenly, first of all, I'll say something, the only thing Max has ever completely fallen in love with that I said, the only thing he ever really gives me credit for after 21 years is this, which is true in the NBA as it is in life. When you are winning, it feels like you will never lose. And when you are losing, it feels like you'll never win. When obviously everything evens out, and we know the Celtics are going to win. Listen, maybe the Celtics are going to win 52 games, and maybe they're going to win 35. But you and I both know they're not. They're going to end up in 40 somewhere. And is 45 or 47? What's going to get you sixth? What's going to get you in the play-in? Is it a big deal to be in the play-in? If it's all about who you're playing in the first round.
Yep.
Right. That's the whole thing. Is it going to be a completely healthy Brooklyn team or a banged up Brooklyn team that has to add home court advantage when home court advantage isn't going to help them? Is it a Philadelphia team without, it just has Embiid? This is what the season's going to be about. But the reason you asked about optimism is because Jalen and Jason are playing well together. And as a result, that starting five, as you know, the Minnesota starting five is the only one better. And what about that? By the way?
That is crazy. Talk about Grande's worlds colliding. Like what is it going on in Minnesota? But hey, that's understandable. And it speaks to the larger not issue with the team, but like something they have to address as the trade deadline approaches. And that's finding the right mix. They've got the right mix with the starters right now. We can actually quibble about that and whether Grant Williams should start sliding into that group and Al Horford should slide to the bench. But I can't yell and scream about that when the numbers have been as good as they are. And even the younger guys, as much as I would like to see them play, I relent. Like Josh Richardson has won this job from start to finish, and I cannot sit here and complain about it. And to the point where I'm starting to think Josh Richardson is untouchable at the upcoming deadline. But before we get to the deadline stuff, just you brought it up at the start, Marcus Smart. And what do you think changed? I don't necessarily think anything changed, right? Like people have always overlooked how good he is as a point guard, and the numbers have always borne out when he is the clear-cut point guard of the Celtics units. The numbers have been great, but certainly coming back from COVID, whether it was just the general advancements of the team plus an inspired Marcus cranking the pace, things have changed for the better for this team in terms of the on-court, of how they look. Is it just as simple as, Marcus had to hear another batch of trade rumors and that was sparked him, or was this just a confluence of everything starting to trend right for the Celtics?
little bit of a confluence. I don't think it hurts players to watch for a couple of games, right? In the middle of when you're in it, all of a sudden you step back for 4 or 5 games. That could be a happy coincidence, the way things worked out. You got to kind of get a better idea of the bigger picture. I think the Ime factor in that he is new and that this is a whole new thing for a lot. There's a lot of new happening that people thought this was just going to be plug and play when this is real life. And here's Ime Udoka getting his first head coaching job. And he walks into a situation where 2 starters get COVID in the preseason. One of the things we talked about, the Celtics have to become better against the zone because they're going to see it all the time. And the great myth of the NBA, if you're not a hardcore fan, you don't realize that there's no practice time in the NBA. You don't practice. You get more practices probably in the entire preseason than you do during 100%. The 6 months in the regular season. And did Ime Udoka have anything close to his regular group during the preseason when there was practice time? Nope. So again, these are just little things. And is everybody dealing with it? Of course they are at some level. But the teams that are starting with new coaches, Orlando started with a new coach and they were like 6-80 to start the year. So I think a lot of these things coming together at midseason, it kind of makes sense.
What have you thought of the job Ime has done? Because during the height of the Celtics woes, as you probably no doubt saw on Twitter and had in your mentions, people were adamant.
Hold on. Stand by. Here it comes.
I mean, so Doc Rivers heard the fire Doc chants. Ime had fire Ime Reddit and, different eras. But I tried to remind myself if Brad Stevens couldn't fix this and, probably Ime Udoka in his first head coaching job in the first 3 months of a COVID inflicted season with injuries every other week, probably wasn't going to fix it either. But just in general, like I do think Ime's had missteps, has had to kind of figure out how to be a head coach and rotations and all that stuff that normal first year coach have to go through. But one of the things that I think fans have a divide on is, are you cool with him calling guys out to the level that he has? And do you think the players have responded the right way to that when he has called them out?
It's not my style. I'm very much a praise in public, go at people in private. But, the NBA is a different animal in a lot of ways. Not my style, but it's what he's come from and he was used to it. And my question is, do the players respond to it? Do the players respect it? They said they wanted it. Isn't it funny?
Yeah.
All summer, all you heard, we want a coach that's going to hold us accountable. We want a coach that's going to hold us accountable. Then they had that horrendous collapse early in the year, right? Either pick one, but let's say the Chicago game for, to pick up a starting point. And Ime calls him out after the game. What did you, and then people hands went crazy, whatever. Isn't that exactly what we said was going to happen? Like you wanted a coach that's going to call him out and hold him accountable. And then he does. And the other half of people lose their mind. So I will say this, it's impossible not to like him. It's impossible not to have great respect for his path and talk to the people who have been around the league, who have been around him. I dare you to find somebody to say something bad, right? About earning this chance. So I laugh. It's like laughing at the fire Doc people. Like, are you people insane that you don't think he's going to get a few years to find out his footing? And oh, by the way, you look at the different first-year head coaches and the different spots they're in. Not only is he coming in with higher expectations because of Brown and Tatum, normally a new coach comes into a situation where the old coach was ousted or whatever. Talk to the basketball community about how they feel Brad Stevens is the head coach. Tough situation all the way around. Expectations are a funny thing, and I deal with it. I'm sure you do too, all the time. We've had this conversation before about what happens after 20 years of Super Bowls and the World Series. And all perspective that when I came here 21 years ago, they ran into Scal and people wanted to have a parade for that team. 2 years ago, the Celtics go the exact same distance. They lose. Kyrie bolts. Al is gone. He takes the money. Marcus Morris, Terry Rozier, they all leave. And that team goes just as far to game 6 of the conference finals. And there were people here spitting on it. Even now, they were talking about it. Like, it didn't count because it was in the bubble. Really? Did the Anunoby shot counted, which never would have happened in a real game because Kyle Lowry couldn't have stood 8 feet behind the line to get that inbound? Like all these little things that you could do if you want to go down. That was an amazing 1920 season was an amazing year
Yeah.
Celtics. They were in every game. For like the last 40, 50 games, they had a chance to win every single one, but it wasn't good enough here. And you kind of roll your eyes because, well, what do you think is coming after all the players I just mentioned leave? And then Gordon Hayward bolts in the middle of the night. Coming back to what you really asked, which is that, are the players responding to Ime? Do they play for him? That's always the first thing I'm looking at. And there's no question that the answer to that is yes.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think, I always wanted to see the reaction. Like, I think they do want to hear Coach Hu, and I think he's been better at it in recent weeks, saying, it's on me. I need to get them better. I need to get them in the right spots at the end of games. But he's got a bullet. It couldn't be Brad. It couldn't be where Brad took everything on himself. Like, Ime has to be able to push it back on the players, which is what, not only did they want it, I think the organization wanted it. Brad had to relent. Like, maybe I'm not reaching them quite the way I was reaching them, but encouraging progress. All right, let's shift gears slightly. What do you think happens here at the deadline? Is it as easy as minor tweaks? Do you think they explore bigger possibilities? Where's your head at as they come to the trade deadline?
We start with, what's on the other end of the phone, right? Everyone is, well, trade this guy, do this and do this thing because you became accustomed here to getting what you wanted. Get Minnesota's best player. That worked. There was a point here 15 years ago when the Celtics got Kevin Garnett, and the Patriots got Randy Moss, and the Red Sox got David Ortiz, and the Bruins goalie was Manny Fernandez, who came from the Wild. So you literally took all the best players from Minnesota and just plucked them out and put them on each team. So you became expected. You can just do that when you want.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I certainly don't expect anything major. I think if there's impetus to do something, it's probably Schroeder. That makes the most sense. Listen, he's in a tough spot right now. If you're looking for, it's even a negative. Schroeder is probably the guy that stands out more right now because the rest of the Celtics are playing now at a much higher pace.
Yeah.
The ball's moving, and Schroeder's game has kind of stayed the same through all that, which saved them on more than a couple of occasions. On the salary situation he's in, it was a arranged shotgun marriage on a lot of levels. And I don't think you can ask for much more than he's given you, but you got to ask yourself going forward, are you better off in the long run with some of those minutes going to Pritchard, who again, Peyton Pritchard's first month, I'm sure he'd tell you, it was a disaster.
Yeah.
But he's got that rookie confidence back. I think some of those minutes can go there. And you want to give Dennis a chance to get paid like he should get paid in the offseason. And in a league that's built around being able to pay your own players, this is just one of those unfortunate situations where, and I think even fans sensed it. They were trying not to fall in love with Schroeder when he was winning the games early in the year, because I think people know enough that it just can't, it's a romance that can't work out long term.
Yeah, and I was just as guilty of it as well. It is staggering. You look at the splits, and it'll make your head explode. For someone who was in the sixth man of the year conversation when he was with Oklahoma City, it's almost improbable that he has not been able to grasp that role here. And now, is that just he's so in his mind, like, is it just a different style of play? Is it the personnel, which is certainly fair because, there's just the Celtics bench hasn't been great this year. But yeah, for whatever reason, it hasn't worked. And I'm at the point where, and everyone's trying to figure out the most creative way to deal them. And I get that, but it might just be as simple as who's got a trade exception, who's can send you back cheaper salary, who gets you below the tax, and you kind of, and off you go. But if there was a stat that screamed that it was the other, coming off this 5 games here, and I guess we can update it through 6, but Celtics were a plus 108 through 5 games, and Dennis Schroeder was minus 15, which is almost impossible to do, but speaks to the fact that as they went one way, as you eloquently said, he has kind of gone another way. He's done less roly of the ball, which is nice, but still, I don't care about getting credit for coming up with the term walking the dog, because that's one of mine that people have sort of picked up on. But I can't, when the Celtics are up, he just loves to do it so much that it's not a time and score thing. It just drives us crazy. Like, we want the clock to go, and he's just, he does the walking the dog deal. It's fun. How long ago does it seem that he and Rondo were? He and Isaiah. God. Yeah, and he went at Rondo because that was the guy he idolized when he first came in. And he and Isaiah had the thing in the playoff series in the first round in 2016. I like Schroeder. I really do. He's a good NBA player, but you want him to be in a situation that he deserves, which is funny because Richardson, while nobody
nobody tends to pay attention to the non-homegrown players, right? Because
Mhm.
that core, you used to that core. Rob Williams is our guy. We drafted Smart and Tatum and Jaylen Brown. Richardson has never come off the bench. He's been a starter. He did early in his career, but first of all, he's having his best year ever shooting the three. And he's doing it coming off the bench. He hasn't played this role in the last couple of years. So veterans that can kind of adjust. And isn't this the thing that the Celtics were really lacking? The fatal flaw.
Mhm.
19 team that we call a disaster when they were the fifth best team in the league and all the above levels is that the role players, the Celtics 3 years ago didn't have Josh Richardson or Dennis Schroeder or guys like that in the role. They had rookies, guys on their rookie contract. We're still trying to make their way in the NBA, whereas Golden State had Iguodala and Pachulia and Bogut and veteran guys in that spot. The Celtics now have one of those guys in Richardson, and that's many things that went wrong 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it's funny because I found myself conflicted with Josh when he signed that extension. I was like, what are they doing? Like flexibility wise, it didn't seem to line up with what they want. Now they've probably aided their cause, where I think he's back next year and he's part of this core unless they need him for salary matching and whatever comes next. But here's where I'll give Brad Stevens the biggest shout out is a couple of days after they signed Josh Richardson, Brad had one of his first summer press conferences and said, we're pretty bullish that Josh Richardson is going to be able to knock down open shots here. And I said, the numbers say the last 2 years that doesn't happen. And what has he done? He's hit like 42% of his wide open threes. And that's all you need. That it's as simple as that. If Grant Williams and Josh Richardson knock down 42% of their open threes, this team is going to cook. And if Jason Tatum does the same thing, then they're going to be just fine. But it's Josh Richardson, one of the better stories for this team. And as much I keep going back to it, as much as I wanted the young guys to play, Josh Richardson has forced the issue. I cannot sit here and tell you that Aaron Nesmith deserves to play. I would love to see him, and for a long-term thing, I need to see these young guys and what they can bring. But no, it is a good situation for these Boston Celtics to be in. What has to let's say they do go minor moves. Peyton Pritchard gets more time. We'll see. Maybe I've said that maybe they do need to move out one of the young guys, whether it's Nesmith or Langford, just to not have us pining for them to play. But it's not the worst thing if they sit on the end of the bench for a little bit longer. What is this team ceiling?
This crazy Eastern Conference. Who the heck knows? I mean, I'm a start of the year. Going back to, if you're a longtime NBA fan, you know the history. 40 years ago, you had the Sonics and the Wizards, then the Washington Bullets played 2 years in a row in the finals with different results. That was my pick at the start of the year. I think you're going to see Phoenix and Milwaukee was my pick at the start of the year when everybody else was going Brooklyn and the Lakers. And Brooklyn, who the heck knows by the time it's all said. I think the East is wide open. I think it's going to be, from a play-in spot, and it's still going to be tough for the Celtics to get. They can do it. But it's still, they gave away. So we talk about things that are impossible statistically. Some of the games the Celtics lost early in the year, it was really difficult to do. It's hard to miss as many. That game against the Clippers was not one of the worst shooting nights this year. It was one of the worst shooting nights by anybody ever. And they still almost won that game. So many of those games got away this year. And I think one of the many questions looking at it from a number standpoint is, because people are saying to me, people always push back on the net rating or differential. And but they can't win close games. So, well, history says playoff success, postseason success is determined more by the net rating and the scoring differential than it is by close games, because that is what history says evens out. So are the Celtics just a horrible team in the clutch, or is this bad luck that is going to even out? Because it should be pointed out, Jason Tatum is having by far the worst shooting year of his career. It's not even close. Like, this was a career 40% three-point shooter. One of my favorite, again, jumping into the number stuff, and I think you have perpetuated this a little bit. It's funny how there are people come up like, oh yeah, Grande, he's that stat guy. He has all the great stats. I'm like, I'm a play-by-play guy. That's what I do. Sometimes I dive into the numbers at 2 a.m. because they're interesting to me. I was always a fan of TV graphics, and I don't have those, although, as Abby indicated, I might have them this weekend. I don't want to.
I don't know. We'll have to work on
Who knows? We don't want to break any news. Why would a reporter want to do that? So, when you look at the numbers, the shooting numbers, my favorite Tatum one this year was he was shooting 33% from three. And then he has the slump for the ages, right? And he goes 0 for 20. And then he goes 14 of 22 from three after that. Well, add those together. What is that up to? 14 of 42. What's that? 33%. He ended up exactly where he was at the start of it. So is Jason Tatum going to shoot what is people are watching this back? Because I'm sure they will over and over again to study every minute of this podcast. If you're watching this back and the season is over, did Jason Tatum end up shooting 33% from three? I'm guessing no, as we're talking now on February 3rd. So there's a lot of things that could get better. As they go, is Jaylen Brown going to have 7 turnover games and 5 turnover games? He should have had 9. He had a couple of those drives. You're like, that were sort of teetering on the brink. So I think the point is that you asked about what's the upside for the season. I think it is still going to be tough because Cleveland is unbelievable. They just refused to, and they had a bad loss tonight to Houston, but Cleveland just won't fade. Or one of those 6 spots going to be available. And again, it's what I said at the beginning. I'd rather be 7 and go into a play-in with a potential favorable matchup with the number 2 seed than I just don't know. You don't have any earthly idea who's going to finish where. I'm not bullish on Chicago. I never really was because they don't defend. I'm not bullish on Charlotte because they don't defend. I'm going to watch Charlotte and Chicago in League Pass every night. They're fun to watch, but when it's time, when Golden State, everybody tries to copy Golden State, right? Because they're the team of the last decade. When Golden State won the championship, the best defensive team in the league. This isn't rock. 20th in the league in one area and 4th in the league in the other, as the Celtics are. Which one would you rather be? Which one gives you a bigger upside? You'd rather be 4th defensively. Do you want to be a team that's been lucky in the regular season to win close games and have a win-loss record better than your body of work? Or do you want to have what is getting close to the 6th, but they're right behind Memphis now for 6th best net rating scoring differential in the entire league? Would you rather be that, not have won as many games because you went 4 for 41 shooting threes against the Clippers and you lost unimaginable games to New York and to San Antonio? And it's like you're getting flashbacks just when I mentioned. So, right. So what would you rather be? Would you rather be a team capable that's been lucky to get to 3 games over 500? Or would you rather be a team horribly unlucky to be 3 games over 500 and have more of the upside and have Tatum and Brown to go to and Smart quarterbacking it in a potential playoff series? I think it'd be fair to say no one's going to expect the Celtics to make a deep run, but we're getting to the point. We're not there yet. We're getting to the point where if you're one of the big shot teams, Brooklyn, Milwaukee, you don't want Boston. You don't want to deal with them. So again, what's the matchup going to be? And of course, as we talk now, there's one giant, because there always is, there's one giant wild card that we don't know about. Do all the Nets come together perfectly well? Does Kyrie get vaccinated? All that stuff, like potential upside. The Philadelphia 76ers at times over the last month have looked like the best team in the league. If Joel Embiid slips on a banana peel, they're a lottery team. So and in a completely unprecedented year in which I've started, you notice that thing about Tatum leading the league in scoring. Everybody's kind of picked up on that. To gravitate towards the total numbers for 2 reasons. Number one, because no one says Fernando Tatis led the National League with 0.81 home runs per game. Right. And so I was raised a different way. And I think the Steph stuff kind of stuck in my mind early in the year when he was chasing that record. But number two, it's really about this. There have never been more players who played in the league because of COVID, because of injuries, because of all the above. And what did Doc Rivers always tell us? What was the number one ability that he cherished? Availability. So therefore, I've started to gravitate more towards the total numbers because it means you're playing. And at the end of the day, Kevin Durant may lead the league in scoring at 28 points a game, but if he only plays 41 games, would you rather have Jason Tatum playing every night? Yeah. That was a Paul Pierce thing, right? So I've started to use that number because it's just interested me more. Like, what about why did that even start at the beginning? Because it was too much for people just weren't, the numbers weren't as friendly. Like, why did we gravitate towards minutes per game? I think or minutes, points, whatever per game. I think the answer is, Chris, because everybody always played pretty much every game. That's not the NBA that we're in anymore. So maybe it's time to I think you always have to change your thinking a little bit because it's evolved. There was a time when I used to just call the games. Now I'm like the old Al Franken character with the mobile unit. I'm doing the games and I'm keeping stats and I'm tweeting because again, on the medium that I might not be on this weekend, I don't have the same, I have reached more people on social media than I do that way. So it sort of changed my thinking. You have to multitask and you can evolve or die in everything. And I just think thinking of it a different way, availability, which is always important, I don't think has ever been more at a premium.
And that's why every time I have that argument with people that they get frustrated with Tatum, I say, he's out there. It's undeniable. He plays through minor stuff. He doesn't complain about that stuff. He complains to officials. But other than that, like he will play through
that injuries. Down too, by the way. And by the way, that's you're talking about evidence of things not seen, right? Here's one. Ime always called guys out. Have you ever heard Ime? Listen, we know Jason Tatum is driving everybody insane, complaining about every call. You ever heard Ime come out there and basically say, Jason Tatum has got to learn to be more mature and stop complaining about it? Or do you think that conversation happened behind closed doors? Because Jason's getting it. He does it once in a while. And sometimes it's deserved. And by the way, officials notice it. Officials don't want to be shown up. But if you have a legitimate gripe, talk to him once in a while. Another thing that's happening, no one's paying attention to. Jason Tatum's free throws are up this year.
Yes.
And in the league, they are way down. And that because they're letting them play because you're actually playing basketball now. And they're letting guys play, which has been great. Yeah.
Well, speaking of a guy who's been available, I would be remiss if I didn't get my guy Rob into a segment of this program. Simmons has got parent corner. I think I just need to have like child, it's a version of parent corner, but I just gush about Rob, my favorite son. I can't be the one who gushes, so I'm going to throw it to you. What has been your most beyond just availability? And I had that little pang today when I saw that his big toe was flaring up and I said, oh no, not against Charlotte, please. What has been the most impressive growth you've seen from Rob this season?
You think that goes with my 21-year partner on the radio side when a guy sits out with a toe? See, back in his day, they play with one arm. Cedric Maxwell, amputated arm, probably. Whatever. I think the short version of Rob, the soundbite version this year, is that when he's been good, he's been very, very good, and he's had some bad nights when he looks his age sometimes, and he looks lost, but. I always go back to Rondo when I say this. Things you can't teach, and I'll teach him the rest. And obviously, Rob Williams is just unique. And it's funny. You said it tonight. Mannix said it tonight. I've heard other people say, "What was Washington thinking about in that three?" You know what? Go back and watch it. Freeze frame where Rob was when that ball got to him. Because I know this because I said he's open when the ball came to him. And you're not thinking when you're doing play-by-play, it just happens. And when that ball came to Washington, I said, he's open because he was. And Rob closed that distance, unbelievably fast and long. And I said this tonight too, and the stat, they must keep it somewhere and on one of your fancy websites. I think you and Jay King make up stuff like
who's going to bet us?
According to according to Stats R Us, StatGeeks.com, like there's no such thing and nobody's checking. You just make it up. I'd like to know how many threes Rob has blocked.
That's actually on my list.
You've never seen that, right? You've never seen that stat. And for a big blocking threes, this goes back to last year. He blocked a ton of them. So that's an interesting one. How much ground he makes up doing that. I love his enthusiasm. I think he's actually a very mature kid. It's funny, you get tagged with you're late once and that's that. But I think he's had a good sense of humor about it. He's very coachable. That aren't a lot of players like him in a league in which you got a few of the Plumlee a little bit, a few of the Nurkic's left, right? And what are you going to do? The guy's 270 pounds and it's a giraffe guarding an elephant. You're going to have to deal with the matchup. But his basketball IQ is high. His ability to move the ball is really unique. And again, I think it was the guy you lock up. I lay back a little bit when it comes to Rob because I know that you're out in the front of the parade and we don't need anybody else.
You just got to hitch your wagons early and cross your fingers. Some of us jumped on the Neesmith bandwagon and not quite as bullish. But
by the way, everything we knew about Neesmith coming out of school, what people were saying about him, you still want to see the tough thing, right, about young players. They have to play to get the confidence and show they can play. But the danger is, are they going to be in the right situation where they can play? We're going to see some players this weekend who are going to get a chance to play. Even in Detroit, they got to make a decision about Jeremy Grant, because this has got to be Cunningham's team. Younger players have to find a spot in a league where they can play. OKC's been very good about that.
Mm-hmm.
Where they're going to win, like they got to come up with something for SGA to sit him down. They're going to win too many games. Last year was helping them win games, and they were like, we changed the locks at the practice facility. Why don't you take a couple months off so we don't win too many games? Because we've got a plan here. So it's a tough one with Neesmith, because you want to see him play, but he has not, as you said, rightly so, he hasn't earned those minutes. I think Pritchard in the last month or two back into consideration for those minutes. But people say, well, let the young guys play. You can't hand them the keys. Got to earn the keys.
I do wonder if the Celtics rattle off a couple wins here, if Ime can downshift maybe just a little. Sometimes I look at those minute totals and I say, would be nice to not play Al 30 minutes a night or Tatum 40 minutes a night. But
there was a game early in the year, and first of all, you had so many leads get away, and even the game they won against OKC, the home game against OKC, he pulled the starters out, remember? And it was almost like an epic disaster. I don't know if he had to put him back in or was about to put him back in. And so Ime's head coaching body of work is like weeks old. So let's let that develop too. And who are you going to rely on? This is your first head coaching job. You waited forever to get it, longer than you thought you should. You went through a lot of interviews to get this spot. I'm going to trust Josh Richardson and Dennis Schroeder
100%
in situations. So you got to let them do it.
All right, let's get you out of here on this. Have you had time to view the Royal Rumble? To bring this conversation full circle, you brought it up, like how the last time you were on was a crushing day for your son. How was he dealing with Brock Lesnar dropping the title and then having the most predictable Royal Rumble win in the history of the Royal Rumble?
The hardest part for me was avoiding the spoilers on Twitter during the Saturday night game in New Orleans, because I knew, first of all, I was supposed to, fly back and be with my son, and we got trapped. I said we got kidnapped at the Four Seasons, so there's not so much you can complain about it. But we were trapped, obviously couldn't get back because of the Sunday. So I was trying to avoid it all day because I knew we would watch it, Sunday night. Then there were the conference championship games on, so eventually we got to it. I was surprised to find out that Shane McMahon got fired over it, since I thought it went pretty well. I thought they got accomplished what they needed to get accomplished. If it was, if Riddle was supposed to win, if the original plan, that would have been interesting. But that would have been rushed too, because we're going to have Riddle and Orton, right? At some point, want to do that student and the pupil thing, but that you can. I thought what was interesting and unpredictable about the night was you knew it was going to be Reigns and Lesnar at WrestleMania. So how are they going to do that?
Right.
Because the Rumble winner has to be rewarded. So actually, I like the finish. And first of all, anything with Paul Heyman's going to be awesome. And the right guy, he has to stay with the heel, and Goofy Brock to root for. And I've been just so much more engaged in it. It's funny. It's been a second wave for me because of my son. He got into it out of nowhere at the worst possible time ever, right during the pandemic.
Right.
All he knew first year of his fandom was the Performance Center and the virtual fan.
The video wall.
Yeah, I got to show you the picture. He was a fan at I think Survivor Series last year, and he's in the back of all the of all these shots, just like you and me on the screen there. And it's been pretty cool. It's like, again, if you do it right as a parent, right, you sort of relive your childhood. And the big story after all this time, because he hadn't been to a live event, was we were on our trip to California last summer as a baseball trip. We went to San Francisco, and he knew we were going to San Diego, and we go to the airport in LA, and he thinks we're going to San Diego. And I told him, because my wife has her big fancy job at CBS, and I said, we might have to make some changes on the trip. So we get to LAX, and I'm like, well, I told you we're going to have to make some changes. so we're not going to San Diego. And he was bummed out. He's like, well, where are we going? And I do this over my shoulder, and it's the flight to Las Vegas.
Ooh.
2 hours later, Sun's on the Las Vegas Strip. Jimmy Smith, some people may know, is like a brother to me. We did Bellator together for years, and out of nowhere, he's now the play-by-play guy. And so 2 hours later, my son's sitting on the Vegas Strip, we're eating dinner with Jimmy Smith, and he's at SummerSlam the next night. And you'll like this. It's a father-son thing. So he goes, I take him to his first live. He doesn't get to go live. Remember, by the way, where was SummerSlam supposed to? Where was it supposed to be the year before?
Oh, in Boston, right? Yeah.
That all got wiped out in the pandemic. So he finally gets to his first live event, which is SummerSlam. And in the main event, you've got Roman Reigns defending the title. 40 years earlier, my first event that my dad took me to at Madison Square Garden was Bob Backlund defending the title against Roman Reigns.
Wow, full circle. Aw.
Cool.
That is pretty neat. Well, all right.
It's hard. During the season, how do you and we play AEW, which is on Wednesday and Friday.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you never see it, right?
Every Wednesday, Friday. There's no time to catch up.
So I am the Kyrie of the WWE right now. I'm a part-time watcher, and so you've erased my cynicism about the Rumble with your by bringing your son into it and bringing it full circle there. But I tune in for nostalgia, and they've got so many guys now. There's no more nostalgia. It's like Shane McMahon was the most nostalgic part. So but
eventually, if you can't lean on it anymore. You got to build a new.
Absolutely fair.
Listen, this is wrong. It was seen this time for 15 years. Now it's Roman Reigns time.
All right, everybody. I need everybody to like, subscribe, check us out on YouTube so you can see Sean's shirt if you're watching. If you're listening on that whole segment did not make any sense. You need to go check us out on the YouTube page. Leave a comment, and if you enjoyed Parent Corner with Rob or the wrestling segment, please let us know, and we'll catch you next time on the Celtics Talk Podcast.